Now an editorial with Jean Gator, acting editorial director.
It's been called a split-second decision in a life-death situation. It's an awesome law enforcement responsibility. It's the use of deadly force. Public doesn't often hear about routine shooting incidents and criminal arrest cases, but it's a tragic and questionable use of deadly force that has heightened recent public concern. Was the police shooting death of a man guarding his van in Troy justifiable homicide or the reckless use of deadly force? Was the fatal shooting of an Ypsilanti youth by an off-duty policeman justifiable homicide or the reckless use of deadly force? And why are 2 Detroit police officers found guilty of negligence in the death of another youth still on the force in promoted positions? Underlying all of these questions is one startling fact. Michigan has no standardized policy in the use of deadly force. The state has rather followed a 15th century common law rule which permits the use of deadly force against all fleeing felons. A study done by the Michigan Department of Civil Rights found that Michigan's fleeing felon rule is based solely on court cases and is often confusing. Fleeing felon rule has the effect of imposing the death penalty for felonies which do not involve physical violence. And deadly force policies among police departments across the state are often inconsistent and confusing. The rising increase in civil suits and the questionable use of deadly force has escalated community police tension in many areas. In tomorrow's editorial, we'll discuss the need for statewide guidelines to make the use of deadly force a last resort measure.
This has been a WDIV editorial. We welcome opposing views. Now an editorial with Jean Gator, acting editorial director.
It's no doubt that law enforcement officials charged with protecting the rights of society have a huge and often dangerous responsibility. It's the misuse of power or deadly force, followed by rulings of justifiable homicide, that has brought community anger and outrage. There's a general consensus that Michigan's fleeing felon rule offers too much leeway in allowing the use of deadly force against all fleeing felons. The Michigan Chiefs of Police Association says that the deadly force issue has been a concern of law enforcement administrators for years. The Michigan Sheriff's Association stated that responsible rulemaking concerning the use of deadly force is essential. The Michigan State Police says that there should be statewide acceptance of circumstances that warrant the use of deadly force, such as murder, armed robbery, and rape. We believe that all agencies involved in this matter should cooperate fully in legislative action to develop responsible statewide policy concerning the use of deadly force. A balanced policy is needed that would give both protection and accountability in law enforcement and protection for the suspect's right to due process of law. In all probability, the use of deadly force will continue to be a sensitive issue. However, uniform policy as to where the line should be drawn in the use of deadly force is desperately needed. It will help improve community police relations and strengthen Michigan's law enforcement guidelines. In tomorrow's editorial, we'll tell you about recommendations for standard police training in the use of deadly force.
This has been a WDIV editorial. We welcome opposing views.
At the Detroit Police Department's firing range, the city has an ongoing firearms program for training all of its officers and many suburban officers as well. In researching our editorial series on deadly force, we found one of the main recommendations was that local police agencies should undertake training in the use of deadly force in regular programs which emphasize safety, sound judgment, and marksmanship. In Michigan, a minimum of 240 hours of training must be given to new police recruits. In many areas, training exceeds those standards. But because of varying local budgets, there is a large discrepancy in the quality of training statewide. The Genesee County Chiefs of Police supports additional training for their officers, but says it can't be accomplished with constant budget cuts. We believe it would be quite lax for the state to address the deadly force issue without concurrent legislation and funds to support standard in-service training in the use of deadly force. Secondly, standard procedures should be determined that include psychological testing and background checks for stricter screening of new police recruits. Steps for developing standard policies statewide in the use of deadly force has strong law enforcement support. But there must be public commitment as well to support those we entrust with this awesome responsibility. It's the first step towards balancing the scales between a suspected felon's right to life and the proper use of deadly force in Michigan.
This has been a WDIV editorial. We welcome opposing views.